Welcome back, everyone, to Wednesday night sessions. I am, as always, your host, Mitch Nobis, and I have kind of a regular running joke with the regular viewers that you can tell what time of day we're recording this show by where I am in our house. I'm in the classroom, the remote learning classroom right now, so you can tell it's daytime. We even have some sunlight behind me. It's a special treat in Michigan this time of year to have sunlight. And then the nighttime editions, as you regular viewers have seen, are in the transformed toy closet / office. So we're in the professional view today, which is cool. And I'm excited for today's episode. Again, the regular viewers know that we often feature writers from Michigan, but since we're in the pandemic and stuck on computers anyways, we're taking advantage of that to bring in some writers from other areas of the country. And that is the case today. Another writer that I have found their work on Twitter, of all things. There's a good writer community out there on social media. And Matthew, our guest today, and I, believe it or not, we're in the same edition of Porcupine Literary, a literary magazine for teachers who are also writers. So I'm excited to have Matthew joining us today. Our guest today is Matthew E. Henry. I love his pen name. His pen name is just Meh, M-E-H, which I think is very cool. And I will toss it over to you now, Matthew. Take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to read a couple of selections from my chapbook, Teaching While Black. If I was going to entitle this reading, it would be called Classroom Conversations, because largely that's what these are. These are poems that came from conversations with my students, either directly things that we talked about in class or things that I thought about afterwards and wanted to say. So I'm just going to jump in. The first poem is entitled Stop Talking. Sitting in a colleague's class, I listened to high school students compare a Christian baker denying wedding cakes to same-sex couples to Black men asked to perform a song and dance for the KKK. The hypothetical caused some to glance at my skin, my silence. From behind, one young man explained the Klan didn't exist anymore, hadn't killed anyone in decades, according to his impromptu estimation. This, after Mother Emanuel, were 9 closed eyes, folded hands in prayers, and open to Jesus. This, after tiki torch Nazis crashed hateful white waves of clubs and cars into peaceful bodies. This, as freedom flyers arrive in mailboxes, daily making white pride promises of protection and a good night's sleep despite the encroaching darkness. It wasn't my class, but I slowly turned to make the only appropriate contact I could. Stop talking. A finger slicing across my throat, miming the tracks of chains, knives, nooses. He tried to make it better, began to explain, no, stop talking. He did. I should have said more. Second poem, also from an actual classroom conversation, is entitled Etymology. White is not an adequate ethnic label in America, but Black is. It often falls to me, their Black teacher, to explain. We were raised from ship holes on hooks, pried loose from the rigid dead, spoons unstacked from the bent, the rusted. We were traded on commercial wins, copper and cloth, rum and molasses, tobacco and hemp. Last names more honest, more telling than Washington. Johnson, Henry, Freeman, Freedman, Brown. Others have acknowledged pasts, are allowed a hyphenated heritage, can add American to the end of anything. Irish, Italian, German, Dutch, French. There is no need for white unless making a statement, a distinction, like separating laundry or water fountains. But our nation is undiscovered. 7 possible ports are not a country. So we are known by our hue, colored, negro, Black, or remain caught in the middle, the passage between whole continents, Africa, America. Quite a number of my students ended up reading this next poem, and some of them were in the class when this conversation happened. It's entitled, When Asked Why All Lives Don't Matter. After a deep breath, I attempted to explain. My aunt had breast cancer. Despite a healthy dose of science and scripture, prayers and prescriptions, the shadow never dimmed. We celebrated her life, mourned the hole her grave dug in ours. We lauded her loving kindness, questioned the natural shocks flesh is heir to, why this disease would claim a wife, a co-worker, a friend, an aunt. At the repast, heads turned to the future, saving other sons and daughters, ourselves. A collection was taken to fund breast cancer research, a medical scholarship for oncology study discussed, a proposal for new. From the back of the church hall, a woman no one recognized screamed, "What about ovarian cancer and prostate cancer? Why aren't you talking about those? All cancers matter." Most of my students nodded into the ensuing silence, but some blank stares and my job description doomed me to be more didactic, to explain appropriate time, place, and manner, intent versus impact, the guilt and shame required to derail communal grief and hijack a narrative to make oneself more comfortable. I explained the human duty to choose. Enter the room willing to bear bodies on shoulders, or our arms empty, leave, and silently stand outside. I said, replace cancer with lives, and waited. These next two poems are not in the collection Teaching While Black, and I didn't mention this before, but I'm a teacher. And some people have labeled both of these poems as rage poems. I don't feel that they're rage poems. I just feel they are accurate to the situations as they played out. The first is entitled, An Open Letter to the White Girls Caught Chanting Nigger on Snapchat Again. How privileged you are. The social stigma of being a racist lingers for only a week. That white woman tears wash away the stench that should follow the shit still stuck to the roof of your mouth. But it's not your fault. You don't know that words have meanings or histories. And it is so unfair that we get to say it. This reverse racism, which makes you too uncomfortable to sing our songs outside of monochromatic parties fueled by Sour Dabs and White Claw. But you weren't singing. Your coven chanted your word of the night as if to summon Jim Crow and Judge Lynch from their light slumber. It's our fault you never had the ovicular fortitude to laugh slur in front of we who must now endure an apology as honest as your hair compared to its roots. And as your parents rush to protect your fragile backs from the whips and lash of eyes as you pass through the halls, the right whispers calling you exactly what you are, your former teacher only has one question, avoided by administration, cautioned by legal counsel. Which nigger replaced my name? Replaced Chris and LaToya's, Hannah's and Timothy's, Michael and Anthony's, Naoma and Ashanti's, Shania and Ashley's. The other rage poem is entitled, An Open Letter to Those Wondering Why I've Called This the Most Racist Place I've Ever Worked. Because you're offended by the title, by the gut punch of Black words on a page you wish were blank, by the accusation you feel personally implied as if suddenly blamed for slavery, the King assassination, and the Clinton crime bill, even though your name was never mentioned in those first 17 words. Because you're stockpiling an arsenal of responses in a self-righteous fallout shelter, a haven of white fragility. Because your emotional antibodies rise to fight the wrong sickness, lymphocytes filled with, it wasn't me, and how is it my fault, ignoring the cancer exploding our community cells. because you sent letters of concern when a teacher called racist actions racist, because a committee was convened to combat the scourge of limited student parking, disenfranchising sophomores with new BMWs, while nigger remains scrawled across art projects, campaign posters, and Snapchat. Because you, Minnesota, nicely told people to leave when they complain. Because your misplaced outrage zigzags like our students of colors when seeing Officer Johnson following them through the hallway, through the cafeteria, to their classes, to their bus stop, to a urinal for a chat, hand on his holster. Because you're making a list of every time you've allowed one of them into your car, into your home. Because your problem with Black History Month misses the point. Because you'll inaccurately attribute that tension in your jaw, that burn between your shoulder blades, that breath you didn't know you were holding. Because this has all been a Rorschach test of your conscience. And it's clear the negative space has coalesced into a white hoodie embossed with the words, "All lives matter." And the last poem that I'll read is one that is actually not based off of something that happened in my classroom. It's based off of something that happened to a former colleague of mine, and I wrote this poem for her. You know who you are if you're watching. It was written to make her laugh because I'm a terrible person. It's entitled, "Regarding Your Aryan Princess in My Class." Dear Mr. and Mrs., I am writing to inform you about your failure. Your daughter, a 10th grader in my class, raised her hand and asked out loud what race she is. Undoubtedly, this comes as a great shock to you both, given the Alex Jones meets Ayn Rand ideology you instilled, and she spews as conservative Christianity. I'm sorry to report the white supremacy you have patiently sown, watered, and sunned has fallen on fallow soil. This may be related to her inferior inference skills and utter lack of reading comprehension of social cues. The first cousin connection between you two may also play a role. Regardless of the cause, I felt it was in her best interest to make you aware that no matter how well stocked your bunker with assault weapons, MREs, and Pabst Blue Ribbons, she is uncertain of her side once the race war starts. While the South may rise, your sheets duly bleached and pressed for such an occasion, she is in danger of being sought out as collateral damage by your more stalwart disciples of David Duke. The Southern Cross beside your MAGA bumper sticker will not be sign nor sigil enough to ward off their advances. I strongly suggest you invest more energy in imparting your white ways. Time better spent than arriving at my office door to complain about an anticipation guide about identity in the house on Mango Street.
Wow. That's I'm the target audience, right? I'm a fellow teacher and writer. So like I love those poems. I can envision these situations. Thank you very much for that reading. Those are very powerful pieces. Yeah, there's a lot of questions I could ask. They're awesome. I'm thank you for picking. Those are some of my favorites too. I've read a number of your stuff on your website online, and I'm glad to hear them read out loud. That was awesome. And I'm very curious if people label them as rage poems, because they on the page I did not assume of them as rage poems. I feel like they're pretty accurate depictions of life in America at this point in time. And ditto for the last one. Yeah, that's like, thank you. Short version, thank you for sharing those poems. So we have two questions for you. First one's usually about the writing itself. So I want to you read a lot of pieces about being a teacher and in the classroom. So just kind of talk to us about that. Like there's the behind the scenes, like when does a teacher, which is like an overtime job, right? Like teaching keeps us very busy. So like, when do you capture these? Like some of these are reflections on things that actually happened in the classroom. So tell us a little bit about just your writing practice, like the nuts and bolts of how does this happen?
Yeah, so one thing that I've done since, I guess first grade is, like you can probably see, I always have a pen under my watch band. And so literally I will pull that out and just like jot down ideas. And so for some of my kids, I'll just stop in the middle of class and jot something down. And they're like, I wonder if that's going to be in a poem one day. So I'm always trying to capture ideas. Before school is a big time when I'm writing. We have a late start schedule at the school I'm at now. And I just get in early, usually like an hour or two before school starts, and just sit and write and process and think through the day before and try to just get ideas down. And then weekends when I'm not grading, which is every weekend, but when I try to find some time to just sit and to process. And I also don't sleep. My ADHD is all get out. And so, 2 o'clock in the morning is a great time to try to let thoughts coalesce and get them on the page.
Yep, I hear that one. We're pretty tired here at Nobis headquarters for the same reason. But lesson planning at 10:30 and writing a poem at midnight. That's
yes, indeed.
a really common approach around here too. Awesome, thank you. So let's stick with teaching then for a minute, since we've kind of already gone down this road. So as a fellow teacher, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like our job is often portrayed, well, it's portrayed a lot of ways. We're portrayed as deadbeats often, but when we are portrayed sort of accurately, it's usually the dramatic side of teaching, that kids come into our classrooms with a million problems. I feel like the world doesn't do a good enough job of highlighting the ridiculously funny side of our jobs. So just off the top of your heads, what's one of your like top 10 funniest moments in the classroom?
So immediately what crossed my mind, there's a poem that I've written about this moment that I'm just trying to find publication for. It's entitled A Teachable Moment, and it was where a student referred to another student as a bag of dicks. Just refer. And
they're not shy sometimes, are they?
It was one of those moments where I was like, I want to laugh hysterically, but that's inappropriate. But also when they made the statement, it was also sort of appropriate to what the other student had just said. So it's like, yeah, I was thinking that too, but you can't say that. And what I ended up doing was like trying to turn it into a teachable moment. It's like, all right, well, what did you mean by that? And like, let's unpack the metaphor. Like, why did you use those words opposed to these other words? Like, could you have said like a bag of farts? Like, why did we choose this language? And then we had that conversation, diffuse the situation. Now go to the office. Like, that was one of the funnier moments for me.
That's awesome. You got to be a heck of a teacher. Because like not every teacher would realize in the moment, like, hey, there's a great rhetoric lesson right here, right now. And you could get into patriarchy, like that could take you down a lot of roads, right? There's so much there. Puritanism, like, repressing. Oh God, yeah. Good job. Be a good lesson. All right. Matthew, it is time to wrap up. Thank you again very much for joining us today, for sharing your incredible poetry and a couple of very entertaining answers there as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope someday when the real world recommences, if you're ever in the Midwest, swing by Metro Detroit and we'll have you at the live show as well.
Excellent. Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, viewers, thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.